1945. The world was already bleeding from war. But in Japan, the morning sun still rose in peace, unaware of what was coming. An entire city vanished in seconds, yet one man staggered out of the inferno, breathing. But his nightmare was just beginning. In the annals of history, there are stories that defy logic, stories that seem so extraordinary they verge on the impossible. Tsutomu Yamaguchi's story is one such tale. The man who survived not one, but two atomic bombings, both at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, holds a place in history as an unparalleled survivor. His story is one that spans the horrors of war, the annihilation of entire cities, and the incredible human capacity for resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering. What makes Yamaguchi's tale even more surreal is that his survival against the most lethal force ever unleashed on the planet, twice in 3 days, is something that should have been impossible. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was born on March 16, 1916, in the city of Nagasaki, Japan, a place that would later become the second target of a nuclear bombing during World War II. Growing up in a world dominated by the rise of militarism and nationalism in Japan, Yamaguchi's early life was marked by the tensions of the 1930s and 1940s, as Japan moved ever closer to engaging in war. By the time World War II was in full swing, Tsutomu was a young man working as an engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, a company that would later find itself at the center of the industrial machinery used for Japan's military effort. His job involved traveling between various cities for business purposes, and it was during one of these trips that he found himself in the center of one of the most horrific events in human history. The year was 1945, and the world had already been ravaged by nearly 6 years of war. The United States had successfully developed the atomic bomb under the top-secret Manhattan Project, and now it was preparing to use this new weapon in a last-ditch effort to force Japan's surrender. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, was dropped on the city of Hiroshima. Tsutomu Yamaguchi had traveled to Hiroshima the day before, planning to return home to Nagasaki later that week. He was there on business, working with his colleagues at the Mitsubishi factory in Hiroshima, unaware that his life was about to take a course that no one could have predicted. On that fateful morning of August 6th, Yamaguchi was making his way to the Mitsubishi offices when the bomb was dropped at 8:15 a.m. The explosion was unlike anything he had ever experienced. A sudden flash of light, followed by a deafening roar and a shockwave that sent him flying through the air. The sheer intensity of the explosion left him temporarily blinded, his eardrums ruptured by the sonic blast, and his body covered in third-degree burns. Yet, despite the overwhelming devastation around him, Yamaguchi was somehow alive. It was a miracle by any standard. In the immediate aftermath of the bombing, the city of Hiroshima was almost entirely obliterated. Within minutes of the bomb's detonation, tens of thousands of people perished, vaporized by the immense heat or crushed under the debris. Buildings, homes, and landmarks were reduced to rubble. Fires raged throughout the city, fed by the intense heat of the blast, and the sky itself turned a sickly orange hue. Yamaguchi, disoriented and severely injured, managed to find shelter in a nearby building. His burns and injuries were horrific, but his will to survive was stronger. Somehow, he found his way to a makeshift clinic, where he was treated by fellow survivors who had managed to escape the worst of the destruction. Yamaguchi spent the following day in Hiroshima, trying to recover from the trauma and injuries he had sustained. Despite the devastation, he made a difficult decision. He needed to return to Nagasaki. Although he was still badly injured, he set out to travel home, his body covered in burns and his mind shattered by the horrors he had witnessed. He had no idea that fate would subject him to another unimaginable nightmare just 3 days later. After a long and painful journey back, Yamaguchi finally arrived in Nagasaki on August 8, 1945. He rested for the night, physically exhausted and emotionally drained, but with a sense of relief. Little did he know that the worst was yet to come. On August 9, 1945, just 3 days after surviving the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, Tsutomu Yamaguchi once again found himself in the path of an atomic bomb. This time, it was the city of Nagasaki that would be struck. At 11:02 a.m. on that fateful day, the United States dropped the Fat Man bomb on Nagasaki. Unlike Hiroshima, which had been a relatively flat city, Nagasaki's geography, with its hilly terrain, created a more complicated target for the bomb. But the destruction was still catastrophic. The bomb detonated with an explosion that dwarfed anything Tsutomu Yamaguchi had experienced. He had been near ground zero, just a few kilometers from the epicenter of the blast. The shockwave struck with a force that threw him to the ground. This time, he was knocked unconscious. When he came to, he found himself buried under the rubble of Nagasaki, his body battered and bruised, his burns even more severe. His first thought was that he was somehow still alive. The devastation in Nagasaki was no less horrific than Hiroshima. Buildings were reduced to ashes, and the city was filled with the scent of burning debris and charred bodies. Tens of thousands of people died instantly, and countless others were left struggling to survive in the aftermath. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, miraculously still alive, managed to stumble out of the wreckage, only to find the city around him in flames. His wounds were excruciating, and his body was barely able to function, but he was still alive. The chance of surviving one atomic bombing is already astronomically low, but to survive two in such a short period of time is beyond comprehension. Yet Tsutomu Yamaguchi did just that. After surviving the bombings of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he was left physically and emotionally scarred. His burns and injuries would take years to heal, and the psychological toll of witnessing the annihilation of entire cities weighed heavily on him. But he did not succumb to despair. He survived, and in the years that followed, he would become a symbol of resilience and a voice calling for peace. In the years after the war, Yamaguchi's life was filled with pain, both physical and psychological. He suffered from the long-term effects of radiation exposure, which would lead to health issues that ultimately contributed to his death from stomach cancer in 2010. But his story of survival became a powerful testament to human endurance. He became an advocate for nuclear disarmament and spoke out about the horrors of atomic warfare. He attended peace conferences, shared his story with students, and traveled the world to speak about the devastating effects of nuclear weapons. Yamaguchi's advocacy for peace and his experiences as a hibakusha, a survivor of the atomic bombings, became a significant part of his life. He believed that the world must never forget the suffering caused by nuclear warfare, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that future generations would understand the catastrophic consequences of nuclear weapons. In recognition of his survival and his role in promoting peace, the Japanese government officially recognized him as a hibakusha in the 2000s, offering him benefits for medical care and assistance. Despite the horrors he had witnessed, Yamaguchi remained determined to speak out against the use of nuclear weapons. He firmly believed that nuclear war could never be the answer to any conflict and spent his final years working to prevent such a disaster from ever happening again. In 2009, Tsutomu Yamaguchi's story was shared with the world through various media outlets, and his remarkable survival became a symbol of hope in the face of unimaginable destruction. His life and his message were an enduring reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who manage to survive, to persevere, and to find meaning in their suffering. His story left an indelible mark on history, one that continues to inspire people today. Tsutomu Yamaguchi passed away in 2010 at the age of 93, but his legacy lives on. His survival against the odds in the face of not one, but 2 atomic bombings remains one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of World War II. Yamaguchi's life reminds us of the unimaginable cost of war and the vital importance of working towards peace and nuclear disarmament. His story, though tragic, is also one of incredible strength, resilience, and the power of the human spirit to survive even the most horrific of circumstances. Tsutomu Yamaguchi's story is not just about survival. It's about the capacity of humanity to overcome the greatest challenges, to find strength in the face of overwhelming adversity, and to work tirelessly to ensure that future generations will never have to experience the same devastation that he did. His voice will forever echo in the ongoing fight for peace, and his story will remain a poignant reminder of the importance of never forgetting the horrors of nuclear warfare.